dance, drink a beer, the girl, get over it.
Hello, my dear friends. Welcome back. It's your man, the Cozy Representative, here again. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to part 2 of the Fall Out Boy Take This to Your Grave story.
If it was anybody else in this band, it would not be the same thing. If it happened under any other circumstances, it would be completely different. And like we've had other people in the band before, and it was just like not the same thing.
We were just some local band with, with other people.
Just some weird thing, like when we all come together that like doesn't exist otherwise. Like for Patrick, for example, I've never had a creative relationship in the same way that I have with him. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, I don't really know how to explain it. Like we hate each other half the time. Like seriously, we're like disagree on every single point. Like anything you bring up, me and him disagree on. But then like for some reason, like as far as like creatively, like I've never vibed with somebody as well.
So I'm gonna jump right into things. I'm not gonna beat around the bush. Let's do a little recap of what we talked about on the last video to get everybody up to speed, myself included. So let's see. It's about 2001 in Chicago. Pete Wentz is this little dude screaming for not the greatest kind of hardcore band in the world, and he's like, I'm kind of sensitive, I have feelings. He's like, I want to start this like Descendants kind of Green Day pop punk side project. Starts the band with Patrick Stump and Joe Troman, and they kind of find a drummer, and then they made this first demo, and it was kind of bad. And Patrick was like, yeah, I'm not so sure about this. And then they, but Joe and Pete were like, yo, we gotta really keep going with this. So they made another demo, and it was actually kind of better. Last night I saw my world expand. And then they were like, hey, maybe this Fall Out Boy thing is actually kind of cool. They were on this label called Uprising Records with the dude from Vegan Reich. Crazy. And then he was like, hey, you guys got to make an album. And Pete was like, hey, I think we got to make an album. So they recorded this album, but then they were like, we don't really like this album. So they were like trying to be like, no, label, don't release it. But the label was like, we're kind of going to release it eventually. And right around this time, they started playing shows locally to hardcore kids who were just standing there like this, being like, I don't like this band. I can't mosh to this, but they were still pushing forward. And right where we left off in the previous video, I left you guys on a cliffhanger. Sorry about that. But I left you guys on a cliffhanger because something crazy was about to happen to Fall Out Boy. Something serendipitous and amazing, and things are about to go from like 2 to 10 real quickly. So, recap over. Let's jump back into the freaking Fall Out Boy Take This to Your Grave story. But first, as always, big thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon, or supports this channel, rather. Patreon, it's a big help. All these lovely people help keep the lights on over here. If you want to support this channel further, if you like what I'm doing, if you want to get some cool bonus content type stuff, there's a link in the description. You can check out the tiers. A little goes a long way, and it means a lot. Once again, thank you to everyone who supports on Patreon. With that, onwards with the Fall Out Boy Take This to Your Grave story, part 2. Let's freaking go. Let's jump in. Let's get right down to business.
It was like weird because it's people like we in our earlier interviews we've said that it started as a joke, and people were like, oh, so you're making fun of it or whatever, and it's like, it's not like that. It's not a joke like that. It's more like, it's like a goof kind of, like it was just like, we were totally just like goofing around in the basement, and like there's no, like when people are like, how do you make your band be like yours? How do we make, like, it's like, I don't know. You throw in a bunch of crap and like mix it, and maybe you get a cake, or maybe you get, I don't know.
That was the thing I was telling somebody the other
pie.
You get Chicago. I was telling someone the other day about that, like, yeah, when he talks about like the joke thing. We weren't a joke, but we were just like, we didn't really. It was exclusively for our own amusement. It wasn't one of those bands where we and a lot of times you'll be in a band and you'll plan things out. You'll be like, oh, we'll do this because people like it or something. And this is like, it was odd because this was the one band that we like all just kind of like, we were just like, oh, we'll just do whatever we want, And that's the one, apparently, I guess, sincerity counts, I guess, so.
We're being paid to say that at least.
So, my friends, there are some things in life, spontaneous, serendipitous moments of unexpected happiness, bliss and wonder which make you truly believe for a moment that there's someone out there looking out for you. And it makes you realize that sometimes all of the bad parts of life, all of the struggle and all the heartache are worth living through if it means the occasional unexpected moment of pure, unadulterated bliss. Moments like when you're in 8th grade and your crush unexpectedly kisses you on a park bench. When you're, playing in your high school band and you're playing this local party and the crowd is actually kind of into you guys and you're drunk off of your first beer ever. Or when it's in the middle of summer and you're like 16 years old and you're lighting off fireworks with your friends on the side of the highway in the middle of the night. Crazy, blissful, serendipitous, happy life moments like that. Moments where the stars and all the chaos of the universe aligns into something beautiful. That, my friends, that kind of unexplainable moment happened to the band Fall Out Boy and their music and their band after the recording of Evening Out with Your Girlfriend. So, the first thing which happened was the strengthening of Fall Out Boy's lineup. That might have sounded insane, but trust me, I'm getting somewhere with this. The first thing that happened was the strengthening of Fall Out Boy's lineup. So, second guitar player TJ Racine, or whatever his name is, was kicked out of the band because according to Joe Troman, quote, he was a nice dude, but he wasn't great to be in a band with, and they had all, quote, gotten sick of him, so they kicked him out. At this point, Patrick began playing guitar and singing at the same time permanently, slimming the lineup of Fall Out Boy down to a solid, symmetrical 4-piece. Around the same time, the band was supposed to go out on a 2-week tour with fellow local Chicago pop-punk band Spitalfield. Amazing band. If you've never checked them out, I highly recommend their first album, Remember Right Now. And they were also, Fall Out Boy, they were supposed to go on a 2-week tour with Spitalfield. They were also booked to record 3 new songs at a place called Smart Studios in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a studio where bands such as, small bands like Nirvana and the Smashing Pumpkins had recorded before. Little bands that no one's really heard of, but apparently they're kind of important. That was a joke. Sometimes people don't know when I'm joking. That was a joke. Clearly. But according to Patrick, their drummer Mike couldn't get enough time off of his job at Best Buy, or maybe it was Blockbuster, to be able to honor his commitments to the band's upcoming plans, like touring with Spitalfield and recording at Smart Studios. In comes the guy that they wanted all along, Andrew John Hurley. So, Andy Hurley originally was only supposed to be a fill-in drummer for the band to record these 3 songs and to go on this 2-week tour, but after Andy fulfilled those commitments, the band realized that they sounded a bajillion times better with a drummer as tight as Andy, and Andy realized that Fall Out Boy's new material, which included songs like Dead on Arrival, actually sounded like something really special that may actually go somewhere. They fucking made it happen, and Andy was now officially the drummer of Fall Out Boy. They got him in the band. Since Andy Hurley joined as the drummer and Patrick became a guitar-playing singer, the Fall Out Boy lineup has not changed at all to this day, about 20 years later. Crazy. So the next thing which changed for Fall Out Boy in this string of serendipitous, amazing moments was the quality of their music. So, I covered in the last video, their music wasn't really that amazing when they started, but during this recording session at Smart Studios, the band were laying down 3 new songs, which, fun fact, were originally supposed to be half of another split EP with another local Chicago pop-punk band who were called 504 Plan, another cool band that you can check out if you're interested. Fun fact, a guy who played bass in that band, his name is John Walker. He eventually went on to join Panic at the Disco. The Fall Out Boy split with 504 Plan never ended up happening, and instead, those 3 Fall Out Boy songs ended up becoming the first 3 tracks on Take This to Your Grave. Now, Those three songs, which specifically were the tracks Tell That Mick He Just Made My List of Things to Do Today, Dead on Arrival, and Grand Theft Autumn / Where Is Your Boy, were completely on a whole other level, a whole other galaxy from what the band had written previously. They were just way fucking better. I'm going to get a lot more into the songs that ended up on Take This to Your Grave and what made them tick a little bit later in the video, but for now I'll just say that somehow, like almost freaking overnight, Fall Out Boy's music went from being very rinky-dink and kind of laughable to extremely tight, polished, catchy, and memorable and distinct in the same way that real proper hit songs are catchy and memorable and distinct. And at the end of the day, Fall Out Boy just got really, really, really freaking good really quickly on these new songs. I'll leave it at that for now, but if you know, you know. We'll get there in a second. So, when Andy Hurley joined the band and Fall Out Boy tightened up their live show and they started demoing incredible new songs like Dead on Arrival and Where Is Your Boy and playing them live, with unreleased recordings of these songs, beginning to circulate around the local scene, genuine, palpable hype quickly started building for Fall Out Boy locally around Chicago, and because of Pete's savviness using the internet and early social networking sites to promote the band online, underground scenesters around the country started to hear more and more about Fall Out Boy, and believe it or not, right off the bat, record labels even started coming calling. When reflecting on Fall Out Boy's growing success during this time, close friend of the band and Arma Angelus bassist Chris Gutierrez, who I talked about at the end of the last video, said the following. I think this quote is really cool. "I started noticing people who weren't associated with hardcore showing up to their shows. There was a group of 24 girls from the Chicagoland area that would show up over and over again. I'd be like, do those 14-year-old girls know you're a total fucking nut job, Wentz? That you're a criminal? That we were playing Hellfest 2 years ago? It's not something that happens often when dudes who legitimately love Neurosis, Cannibal Corpse, and death have 14-year-old girls showing up to see their new band. I remember mocking Wentz when I saw him signing autographs, but he was like, what am I supposed to do, bum these kids out? So, as Fall Out Boy started building up an impressive amount of local hype and anticipation for their debut record was building, like I said, record labels came a-callin'. Initially, Fall Out Boy really wanted to get on Drive-Thru Records, which Drive-Thru was like the #1 place to be for a pop-punk band in the early 2000s. Their roster included huge, game-changing bands on the forefront of the scene like Newfound Glory, The Starting Line, Early November, Midtown, the list goes on and on. Fall Out Boy actually ended up doing a showcase for Drive-Thru, and for anyone who doesn't know, a showcase is kind of an outdated sort of thing these days, I think, but that was back kind of a pre-internet thing where a band would play their set, to basically do a little live set exclusively for people from a label, for them to see. It wasn't even like a real show. They just play somewhere and people from the label would watch to get a feel for the band. So they ended up doing a showcase for Drive-Thru, and apparently the Drive-Thru people thought the band had great songs but were not impressed by their live show, and because of this they offered to sign Fall Out Boy not to Drive-Thru but to Drive-Thru's smaller imprint label, which was called Rushmore Records, and Fall Out Boy actually didn't want to settle for that, so they passed up. They were also apparently talking to other labels such as the Militia Group and Victory Records, but Fall Out Boy eventually hooked up with a management company called Crush Management and got to talking to a guy named John Janik, who owned a pretty small indie label called Fueled by Ramen Records, alongside a guy named Vinny Fiorello, who was the drummer of Less Than Jake, who co-owned Fueled by Ramen, and John Janik had become interested in signing Fall Out Boy to the label Fueled by Ramen Records. So, Fueled by Ramen at the time was an insanely small independent label out of Gainesville, Florida. Their roster at the time featured 90s ska punk bands like The Impossibles and Animal Chin, as well as, in my humble opinion, criminally underrated pop rock acts such as The Stereo and Punchline. Again, those are two more music recommendations from the Cozy Representative. The Stereo and Punchline. The Stereo... Okay, I don't want to go off on tangent. Those are just great bands, okay? And probably the biggest thing that Fueled by Ramen had released at that time was a self-titled Jimmy Eat World EP in 1998. So, Patrick Stump recalls about this time period. Quote, "We ultimately decided that Fueled by Ramen was the best place for us. They were the smallest of all the labels involved, the label with the least gloss to them at the time. I was like, I don't know about this, Pete. Pete was the one who thought it was the smartest move. He pointed out that we could be a big fish there, so we rolled the dice." However, there's a little known, kind of odd fun fact about their signing to Fueled by Ramen. Behind the scenes, they basically already had a deal with major label Island Records at this point. What? Crazy, but it's true. Bob McLinn from their management, Crush Management, explained, quote, "Rob Stevenson from Island Records knew all the indie labels were trying to sign Fall Out Boy. We did this first ever incubator sort of deal. Island gave us money to go on Fueled by Ramen, who we did a one-off with, knowing we could get upstreamed and have a bunch of radio stuff behind us on the next record. I didn't want to go to radio too soon. I wanted to build a base, but I knew radio was something this band would need in the future. It wasn't a classic major label upstream thing. I didn't want to start the band off on a major because they wouldn't understand it, and I didn't want to stay on an indie forever because these indies didn't really have radio staffs. Having a one-off with Fueled by Ramen followed by a chance to move to Island was sort of a perfect scenario. It was a true indie deal with Fueled by Ramen. I think they made the record for maybe $18,000. The band slept on floors while they were recording. They paid their dues. There was no tour support. They got in the van." So, isn't that crazy, right? Island Record, damn. I don't know. There's kind of a lot to unpack there. But anyways, the stars really freaking aligned for Fall Out Boy. So 2 months before Fall Out Boy's official debut studio album on Fueled by Ramen was slated for release, which that date being March 25th, 2003. Remember our good friends over at Uprising Records and our old friend Fall Out Boy's Evening Out with Your Girlfriend? Yeah, that thing got released. So although Fall Out Boy were literally practically a completely different band now on pretty much every level, and like I said, although Fall Out Boy did try to stop Uprising from releasing the record, like I was mentioning earlier, contracts were already signed with Uprising, promises were made, and money was spent on the project already, so Uprising went ahead with the release. And the release of Evening Out was delayed many months because apparently Uprising was in the middle of changing distribution partners, which caused delays on their end. That caused the record to be released 2 months before Fall Out Boy's real debut, their Fueled by Ramen debut, which did cause some confusion amongst fans at the time. And still to this day, there's confusion there. However, Fall Out Boy was not very stoked on the release of Evening Out with Your Girlfriend at the time, so their attitude on the release was, quote, "If they're going to release the record, we're just not going to talk about it." Pete Wentz remarked the following in regards to Evening Out with Your Girlfriend. "My personal take is that it's not what I would consider the first Fall Out Boy record. Hurley wasn't on it, and he's an integral part of the Fall Out Boy sound. But it is part of the history, the legacy. NASA didn't go right to the moon. They did test flights in the desert. Those are our test flights in the desert. It's not something I'm ashamed of or have weird feelings about at all." So, my dear friends, Fall Out Boy's Take This to Your Grave was officially released on May 6th of 2003 through Fueled by Ramen Records. Produced by a man named Sean O'Keefe, who has also produced records like Spitalfields Remember Right Now, Punchline's Action, and Hawthorne Heights, The Silence in Black and White. Take This to Your Grave was a juiced up, promising entry into the burgeoning early 2000s pop-punk canon. Musically speaking, Fall Out Boy were now tighter than ever, and not to mention extremely banging. I mean, fuck, they went from sounding like a goofy teenage forgettable pop-punk band playing at the high school talent show who you and your friends would laugh at on Evening Out with Your Girlfriend, to sounding like a cutting-edge, attention-grabbing professional band. These new songs took the bittersweet, lovesick, heart on your sleeve, emo, melodic nature of bands like Saves the Day or Taking Back Sunday, armed with some of the catchiest melodies sung by a dude who could actually legitimately sing. Emotionally cutthroat lyrics which had the ability to connect with lovelorn teenagers everywhere, but were simultaneously sincere and cathartic, as well as a hearty dose of the melodic hardcore sound of bands like Lifetime, and a hardcore edge which set them apart and made them feel more urgent and viscerally gut-punching than other tamer pop-punk bands at the time, like, for example, Yellowcard, and ended up with songs ready to compete with radio pop-punk stalwarts of the era like New Found Glory or The Starting Line. Fall Out Boy were off to the races. Patrick Stump specifically really upped his game on these songs. He always had a naturally good voice, but on these songs he wasn't as nasal or juvenile, and he had a more commanding presence and displayed a very distinct style, and again, he could actually sing. He wasn't quite yet singing like Beyonce like he was on later records, you know, he didn't quite have the soul voice yet, but he had a really smooth tone, which was a breath of fresh air in an era of pop punk where super nasal voices like Tom DeLonge or the New Found Glory guy were the norm. They also developed a new writing style on these songs where Pete Wentz handled the lyrics and Patrick handled the writing of the music and the melodies, which proved to be a winning combination, one of the big missing pieces of the Fall Out Boy puzzle when it came to their songwriting. At the end of the day, Pete Wentz and Patrick Stump are two guys who are really lucky that they found each other. On these songs, they cracked the formula of their working relationship. Pete Wentz is an ideas man, a visionary, a tastemaker, a man with a million swirling ideas in his head, but lacking the know-how to really see them through on his own. Patrick, on the other hand, a musical handyman and a bona fide, capable, talented songsmith, equipped with the ability to take all of Pete's wild ideas, make sense of them, and formulate them into great songs which see his vision through. This working relationship saw them pumping out songs like Where Is Your Boy, a song with all the qualities of a proper hit, a song so catchy and well done and distinct that it really blew any other local Chicago pop-punk band who they were playing with at the time out of the water and set Fall Out Boy apart as a band really clearly destined for bigger and better things. Some quick highlights of certain songs on the album. My personal favorite cut on Take This to Your Grave is the song Chicago Was So 2 Years Ago. One of the best, in my opinion, one of the best choruses on the album for sure, and a really cool bridge with like a cappella vocals and really dark lyrics which kick back into the final chorus perfectly. It just goes absolutely nuts. Guest vocals from Motion City Soundtrack's Justin Pierre on this one as well. The song Grenade Jumper had a pretty tongue-in-cheek lyric in the chorus. "Hey Chris, you were our only friend," a reference to their literal friend, Chris Gutierrez, who, I've talked about and quoted a bunch in this video already, who was one of Fall Out Boy's earliest supporters. The band had some story where they were like, while they were writing this song, someone was like, "We should have a song where the lyrics are like dedicated to our fans, thanking them for their support." And then someone else joked, yeah, it would be like, "Hey Chris," because at one point Chris Gutierrez really was the sole supporter of Fall Out Boy, so they made the chorus "Hey Chris." I don't know, it's pretty funny. One small yet very pivotal moment on this record, towards the very end of the song Saturday, Patrick hits a couple falsetto notes. Now, I've talked to some people who were like sort of in the Chicago scene listening to Fall Out Boy at this time, who have told me that Patrick using falsetto on this song was kind of a big deal. Obviously, Patrick went on to use like humorously excessive amounts of falsetto on their later records, again sounding kind of like Beyonce at a certain point. But his falsetto moment on this record in 2003 at the end of Saturday was very cutting edge and different for a pop punk singer to utilize at this time. Falsetto had always mostly been a technique exclusive to like R&B or pop music. Rarely was there ever falsetto in like rock music in general, let alone pop punk. There definitely wasn't any falsetto in like Blink-182 or MXPX songs, you know what I mean? So that, even though it was such a small moment of him doing a little falsetto thing at the very end of the song, this was an example of Patrick bringing a whole new, unique flavor into the rigid world of pop punk, expanding the palette for what is possible in terms of techniques a pop punk singer can utilize, and really influencing whole generations of pop punk and even rock singers after him. And a fun fact, the album cover of Take This to Your Grave, which we all know and love, was actually not the original album cover. Pete and Patrick explain, quote, "Patrick, the band was rooted in nostalgia from early on. The 80s references were very much Pete's aesthetic. He had an idea for the cover. It ended up being his girlfriend at the time, face down on a bed, exhausted in his bedroom. That was his bedroom in our apartment. His room was full of toys, 80s cereals, but we couldn't legally clear any of the stuff in the photo. Darth Vader, Count Chocula." Pete says there's a bunch of junk in there. A Morrissey poster, I think a Cher poster, Edward Scissorhands. We submitted it to Fueled by Ramen, and they were like, we can't clear any of this stuff. The original album cover did eventually come out on the vinyl version. Patrick follows up, "The photo that ended up being the cover was simply a promo photo for that album cycle. We had to scramble. I was pushing the Blue Note Jazz Records feel. That's why the CD looks a bit like vinyl and why our names are listed on the front. I wanted a live photo on the cover. Pete liked the Blue Note idea, but didn't like the live photo idea." So Take This to Your Grave was a bit of a slow burn when it first came out, but over time, as the band was touring on it, it gradually started garnering a lot of hype in the underground music world all over the country and eventually all over the world. By the end of 2004, the album was apparently moving 2,000 to 3,000 copies per week, and prior to the release of their 2005 record, From Under the Cork Tree, Take This to Your Grave had sold between 200,000 and 300,000 copies. Absolutely unreal numbers for a debut album from a pop punk band on an indie label in 2003, and the record eventually went gold with sales of 500,000 copies in 2006. And that's about where I'm going to wrap things up today. Take This to Your Grave, it was kind of obviously humble beginnings and a small start for Fall Out Boy, but they're a band who, the stars really aligned in their favor somehow during that time, and they made a record that ended up kind of being the blueprint or the gold standard for pretty much any like pop punk band or pop rock band or a lot of just alternative bands in general in throughout the decade of the 2000s. Like I was saying with Patrick's vocals, he really pop punk singers in general got better after Patrick Stump entered the game, because Patrick threw that thing into the world of pop punk, where it was like, oh, now if you're in a pop punk band, you can't just sound like Tom DeLonge. You gotta be a good singer. You're gonna look like an idiot next to like Patrick Stump. You know what I mean? So things like that, and Pete Wentz's big ideas and big vision, and just Fall Out Boy being such a cool, cohesive unit as a whole, really set a precedent and was really, really influential on the world of not even pop punk, but not even, kind of just alternative rock music as a whole in like the decade of the 2000s. And now it's about 20 years since Take This to Your Grave came out, which is crazy. And it's still, such an influential, iconic, important record. And again, Fall Out Boy are just a very special band, and a band who, the universe just stars aligned and whatever. I don't know if there's a higher power out there, but someone was like, Fall Out Boy is a band that needs to happen. The kids need to have Fall Out Boy, and it fucking happened. And I hope they release a new album soon. It's been quite a while since a new Fall Out Boy record. I like the newer Fall Out Boy material, but because I like pop music and whatever. But I hope they if they do make a new record soon, I hope I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, I hope they make a pop punk album again, because I think that would sound a little contrived, but I hope they at least bring some like guitars into the mix more so, and I just hope they sound like a band in a room again and have that warm feeling that Fall Out Boy really used to have before their hiatus. So anyways, I could talk all day and all night about Fall Out Boy, but I'm going to cut it off there. Thank you guys so much for watching this little series about Take This to Your Grave. It's been your man, the Cozy Representative. Hit the subscribe button if you like this shit. And yeah, have a great night. Long live the car crash hearts, man, for real. Forever a lake effect kid, motherfucker. Believers never die. Yeah, Fall Out Boy forever. Thank you guys so much. Have a great night. Peace.